a red flag flying here.
Just in time to start things off. For a moment I didn't think the computer was going to respond in time to get my picture on face on time, but and I'm here and you're here, and welcome to join us. Welcome to the Dream Team. Isn't it wonderful? But listeners and watchers at home, you're the most important, and we all know that. I'm going to start off straight away with our moments of the week, and I'm going to start with Stuart Sutherland, because when we were discussing it beforehand, you're excited. Yes, it is the moment of the week. Indeed. Thank you, John, my son, for singing that to us at the most inappropriate time. And Stuart, back to you. Because when we started talking, you have the most fascinating and obscure moment of the week to share with us.
Well, I'd say it's a personal one, but I experienced what I would consider peak Tory, where I was reading through some comments on Facebook, and we're going through a bit of a childcare crisis at the moment, and there was lots of people talking about how they're really struggling and the shortages of spaces and how they're going to deal with, you know, the lack of being able to get grandparents to look after kids. And he goes, this fella goes, well, I planned and thought things through when I had my kids. I thought about the finances. I knew you should have prepared for this. And I was like, this is the same guy. Not a couple of weeks ago was saying, well, the government had no idea that this was coming. Nobody could have seen it. And I was like, that's just peak Tory. Peak Tory.
I mean, are you finding, like I'm finding on social media, that it doesn't matter what they do, what the government does, there are people who will come on and defend them. It doesn't matter how silly the defence either. And if all else fails, just say, and Corbyn was rubbish.
Oh yeah, you know, you couldn't have done better. Jeremy Corbyn wouldn't have done better. You know, he would have. I mean, to be honest, I think going off the fact that most governments in the world have done better than us, that's just an example of what could have been done.
I mean, we've been talking about Keir Starmer's speech before, and sort of we have things to say about it. But the truth of the matter is that, Stuart, I did appreciate the multiple mentions of the word incompetence.
Yeah. Is corrupt not a better word for this government?
Incompetent and corrupt?
Yeah.
I mean, I was saying that thing on Facebook about the all this money that they splashed to their mates and just not getting anything back.
Splashed up the wall.
Thank you for that. Moment of the week, I don't know. Sam!
Me! So I had an interview with the Labour Party to see if I was a suitable person to be a Labour Party candidate in the elections that will hopefully take place next year. So it wasn't a totally new experience for me because I did it last year before the election that I didn't win, and therefore proved that you don't have to just put a red rosette on a monkey and they'll win an election in the northeast. I'm proof that other things do stop people winning elections. So yes, it went very well. I haven't had the result back, whether I've passed or not, but it's one of those things. People think you become a Labour Party member and stuff is just handed to you. It's actually a really difficult half-hour interview where you're grilled by 3 other Labour Party members and like, what have you done in your community and what, you know, and all of this. I would go on, but then I'd be telling everybody the questions which you're not supposed to do. Yeah, it's not easy. So I'm really proud of myself, and obviously I'm hoping that I get approved and then that my branch select me.
I learned from the rule book that the decision of the assessment team is final. So they send the result off to the local campaign forum, but the decision that they make on you, that is it. So there's no excuse if you don't find out quickly. Sort of where it goes. What I intend to do is once we've got a few names from people, What we'll do is we'll bring people who've been accepted by the Labour Party in one at a time, and I think we may well ask them those questions again.
Yeah, yeah.
And,
I
and,
mean,
and sort of then they can tell people, and people can get a look at the kind of candidates who are coming forward and getting right. Moment of the week. Laura, you're a
Yeah,
poor person at the moment, aren't you?
I was a little bit under the weather, but it's nothing that a ton of makeup can't fix.
You are not a little under the weather. You have a temperature of 101.5. But we don't think this is COVID.
We hope it isn't. I don't know. I've managed to get myself a test for tomorrow, so we'll
After you're
see.
going to be tested.
Yeah.
You managed to get one.
I did, yeah. It took a while, but I did get one. Not as long as a lot of my friends, but I'll not go into that. I think we might be talking about that later on anyway.
Oh,
So.
yes, anyway. Moment of the week.
It's going to be a quick one, and it was one that really cheered me up today. I really felt rubbish, and I saw the picture of Priti Patel's spitting image puppet today, and it was just everything I wanted it to be. It was so funny. For those people who are watching or listening to this over our podcast, we do have a picture of it up there. It's just perfect, isn't it? I absolutely love it. It really cheered me up today, so I'm excited to see the new spitting image, and I thought that was just something that really brightened me up today.
I think we desperately need a return of spitting image to our screens. I'm hoping it'll be as good as it was. We need something to laugh about, if nothing else. And last of all, Paul, your moment of the week.
I've asked someone to share an absolutely outstanding piece of journalism from the BBC, and I think journalism's got a kind of bad name at the moment, and the BBC's got a kind of bad name. So I think it's nice to see something really, really good, and it goes into it's basically about the oil industry clouding climate change for years. It was Exxon originally who first found out that climate change was happening and scientifically happening. But then they says, oh, what we're going to do about this? And they start to cloud it using the model of the tobacco industry, who for years clouded the science. And it's a really good article. I suggest that you should read that one. So I think someone will be kind enough to share that on the timeline. Worth a read. Yes,
it's on the Political Unmuted page at the moment, and unfortunately that's behind a paywall, or behind certainly a join wall, so I don't you can't just go on to that, but we'll make sure certainly after. I mean, what struck me about this, Paul, was that everybody's sort of saying that they were quite upbeat until Boris Johnson today said about coronavirus, until Boris Johnson said humanity will get through this. I'm pinching your point, Sam, but it's sort of other people saying.
I was really chilled out about it until I thought that Boris thought it was potentially an extinction event and passed me by. But yes, apparently Boris said humanity will get through this.
Well, I'm pleased to hear it, but of course, when we're talking about climate change, we are talking about an extinction.
Yes.
And it's just so important. Thank you, Paul. I had a look at that article. It's absolutely excellent. It's recommended. We just need to plough on, sort of ignoring the noises off, which would distract us. Righty-ho, thank you very much for those. I said to the team, if you're a listener, I said to the team before we started, we're talking too long, people. We're talking too long. Can we just sort of be more precise? So we finished a good 10 minutes before normal about that moment of the week. So you're doing very well. Mr. Grace used to say, you're all doing very well. Okay, big story.
Now it's time for the big story.
And the big story this week, of course, is coronavirus. I think it's been rather overtaken by events since, but the big story that we wanted us to talk about is local lockdown, and connected to that test and trace, and so it all ties into the same kind of thing. I mean, let's just first of all talk to us about Laura. Talk to us about local lockdown. I mean, what is it? What are we supposed to be doing? I don't think anybody has a clue Can you school us in this and then perhaps pass judgment?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. The local lockdown was brought about because the government has sort of given powers to local councils to decide what they're going to do. County Durham decided that we needed to have a local lockdown because our cases were going up and up. Uh, and it's interesting, especially for us in Sedgefield as well, is because we have some particular villages that border both County Durham ward and Darlington, so it meant half of the village had to be locked down and half of it didn't, and that caused quite a bit of friction. Honestly, it was all quite confusing, and I think people were a bit sort of not sure what the rules were and what they weren't. And honestly, I'm struggling to keep up with them myself, and not just in terms of the local lockdown, but it seems like every day something else is happening and there's another thing we've got to do. I think I have faith that these decisions are taken because they are needed. I think the local lockdown was sensible to do, but because all of the rules and what you're allowed to do with that, as with everything the council does, is always dictated by central government, then there's only so far you can take it, really. I mean, we've spoken about this for the past few weeks, I think, and you know that I'm still infuriated by the whole thing, and I'm so angry that the whole thing wasn't dealt with better earlier. Why he didn't send people over to China to be in the talks in January is still beyond me, and I haven't calmed down about that yet. So I guess we just have to keep going and keep trying whatever we can. It is still a problem. I've seen loads of people recently talk about how, well, all these measures aren't working anyway, so let's just go back to life as normal. Everything's fine. It's only a small number of people who are even affected by it anyway. And I think people are just a bit fed up and a bit sick of hearing it all. But I did watch the update with Chris Whitty and someone help me out, the other fella. No?
Patrick Vallance.
Thank you, Patrick Vallance, the other day. And I find them too much more digestible. I feel like they just give us facts that we can do with whatever we want. And they were saying this is not trivial. This is really important, and it is really serious. People who were saying, well, the flu, we lose just as many people with the flu. Yeah, people do die of the flu, and that is horrendous. No death is trivial, but we lose about 20,000 people a year due to flu. We haven't even had this a year, and we've lost nearly 50,000 people already. So no, it's not trivial. It is serious, and we do need to do everything we can. And so, cut a long story short, which I haven't done. Yes, I think the measures were needed, and I think personally, there needs to be more.
I think that people have not, Laura, cottoned on even yet to the fact that the difference between coronavirus and ordinary flu is that coronavirus is much more contagious. So you're keeping that R below 1, and they've had it below 1, and you've just got forgotten just how contagious this is, and it's just beginning to go. Stuart, the county council is coming to an awful lot of criticism because they seem to have jumped quite early on this one. Certainly, if County Durham is not one of the worst places in the country by a long, long way. So, do you think that they made a mistake? Should they have let the other local authorities go and allowed our people more a period of longer of freedom?
No. Local lockdown was clearly the right thing to do. I think the implementation has been wrong with things like the childcare issues. But I like to think that, DCC is actually looking out for its people. And then if you look across the border towards like Hartlepool, that have Skyrocket and stuff, they don't seem to be showing the same kind of love to their constituents.
Sam, Stuart mentions the
informal childcare.
You fell out with your MP about this, didn't you?
Well, I had a very interesting experience because I haven't actually heard back from my MP yet, but my MP's office manager found my post on Facebook and argued against it. So that was really weird and a bit unprofessional, I thought. My MP still hasn't replied, but I did send her a very strongly worded email, which basically amounted to, if you need people to work, then you can't take the childcare off them, and you don't. And the argument that I was getting from people was, you know, we've got the same local lockdown restrictions as everywhere else, and my argument is you can't level up the north by giving us the same rules as everywhere else. We need a bit more help, and unfortunately our economy has been built on masses of unpaid care, so you can't just whip that out from underneath us and expect us to be able to go to work and pay your taxes. That's not how it works.
Stuart, how does this tie in with test and trace?
Oh, so many ways. You know, I think the issue that we've been seeing locally is a lot of people have struggled to get tests, taking time off work to wait to get a test is, impounded the situation. And I think people have slightly given up on the idea of even getting a test. Like I've seen people who've said, "Oh, it's too hard, it's too much work, it's not going to work for them." They've said it's like an impossible situation that they're in. Like my brother tried to get a test, and he was offered one in Aberdeen, or if he could, in the next 20 minutes, get to Gretna. So it just shows how broken it all is.
But what I have to say is that it's not a fortnight ago that they were promising us, was it 10 million tests a day?
Yeah, and let's see what we're getting through now. 240 is the capacity, and I think that we're getting 4 times the amount of requests than the capacity. So there's 1 million people asking for tests a day. So if they all want testing, that's just a backlog that's going to build and build and build. So eventually it's going to be, a week before you get your test back, 2 weeks before you get tests back. And nobody can really sit around and just isolate on the idea.
But Laura?
Yeah, just on that, and also what Stuart was saying earlier on about planning ahead. A company called DNA Nudge were the company that have developed the fast testing that we've been talking about recently, about a 90 minutes test. And Matt Hancock's found out about this and has decided that is what they're going to use for the moonshot. And has been waxing lyrical about how amazing it's going to be. But actually, DNA Nudge have gone, whoa, hang on. We don't have the capacity to do that. There's no way we could physically administer this many tests as quickly as you want. At the minute, they sort of go to care homes and a few vulnerable wards in hospitals. There's no way, they've said there's absolutely no way that they could deliver this many tests and carry them out. And there hasn't been a response to that, and Matt Hancock's all like, yay, we've got it sorted. So I think it's, as Stuart said, it's going to be just ongoing, and we're going to end up with a massive backlog. Ridiculous.
So Paul, how do we put this right?
Well, they've made such a mess of it. I'm not really sure how they do put it right. We should have had test, track and trace in place. We can see it's an absolute mess. I spoke about this last week about how that is actually not functioning properly at all. So even businesses that are doing it correctly, the test, track and trace isn't getting to those people. It isn't telling those people who need to isolate that they need to isolate. We've also seen the £10,000 fines come in, which is discouraging people from actually getting a test now. So we've got an absolute mess. And, I think the idea of them not self-isolating and rich people can afford to pay £10,000, can't they? So it's once again, it's like the poor people, the people who have to go on the front line, the people who are putting themselves at risk of catching this. And, it's completely unrealistic. In schools, we're seeing a lot of schools being shut. My school's currently shut because of a COVID outbreak. It's happening, and it's happening everywhere. And they're not putting in those social distancing measures that they need to, even when you follow the guidance to the letter. And I think that's the issue that we have.
Laura, are we heading towards a nationwide lockdown?
I think we probably should be. I don't think we will. I think, and I understand the devastation this whole process has caused around like the economy and people's mental health. again, if it had been done properly originally, we wouldn't be in this. But honestly, I don't see another way to stop it. Even when we get a vaccine, it's going to take a long time for that to filter into our society. I can't second guess this government anymore. I don't know what they're going to do next. I really don't.
And what's the solution? Tell us the solution. I mean, with respect to you four Labour people, it's all right for you to sit there saying that this is a complete cock-up. The government is useless. And I think everybody out there knows that, even if they try and defend the government. But sort of, there has to be a solution then. Sort of, or are we just sort of beating a poor defenceless government that sort of nobody could do any better for? Paul?
I think they need to stop employing their friends. I think they need to stop giving contracts to people who don't know what they're doing. It's been a cash cow for people, this, hasn't it? We've seen millionaires and billionaires increase the wealth exponentially as cases are increasing exponentially. We've seen the reward for failure of Dido Harding. You know, she ran Test, Track and Trace. Now she's going to run the entire NHS, apparently, you know, in England. And that's because she's done such a terrible job. I don't think it would be possible to have the connections necessary to make such a mess of this for an ordinary person. If you don't have yourself embedded in that establishment, you are not going to make this absolute cock-up that they've done. But by giving the contracts to people who are completely out of the depth, but also think they're incredibly wise and incredibly talented. These are the most talented people we have. They've got billions of pounds and what have you. That's the problem, you know. You don't put someone who oversaw a data breach at a communications company in charge of Test, Track and Trace. It's absolute nonsense, and that's what we're doing.
We're talking about capacity, though, aren't we? We're talking about the capacity of business to not upskill, but sort of extend its capacity to huge amounts very, very quickly. Now, how do we do that apart from chucking large amounts of money at companies which we think might be able to produce the goods?
Me.
Anybody?
Personally, I would have done it through the NHS. I would have done it through local surgeries. I would have sent 10% perhaps of their capacity, 10% of testing, and just saying, right, there you go, 10% of your patients, that's how many tests we'll send you. You deal with your local cases. They know what they're doing. It might have been difficult for them, but it's difficult for everyone at the moment. They could have run the testing system instead of outsourcing it to have like, oh, you've got to go to a drive-through where people don't have public transport. Take it to the communities. Or in Germany, they're doing all sorts of different things. Other countries are managing to do it. Also, keep a lid on it. And we never did, really did we? We never kept a lid on it in the beginning.
I mean, Sam, the R rate is just running crazily out of control at the moment. And sort of, I mean, I'm quite on the government side about this, because what you've got to do is you've got to try and restrain the R rate. And so then you think, well, how do you restrain the R rate? Well, this is passed on by meeting people. It basically passed on by breathing in other people's breath. So you've got to try and stop people meeting. And so, right, well, who are we going to stop? All those people who go to work? Well, no, they've got to go to work. And so all those children who go to school, well, it's very important that they go to school. So where can we begin to restrain people? Those people who go out for meals and to the pub and well, no, because they're spending the money that keeps the economy going. So surely anybody with a brain can see that what we have to do in order to try and restrict contact is to stop people meeting just for the sake of meeting each other. And so is the government not right to try and stop you meeting your grandma?
I mean, you know, in a short-term situation, in the first 3-month lockdown where we were all G'd up for it, yes. But we're now going into a long-term situation where the Prime Minister said today the restrictions he put in place might last 6 months. And we've got to think about people's mental health being a serious concern for their well-being as well as their physical health. Now, I'm not saying that we should all have our kids around our grandma's house and act carelessly. And when I was arguing for informal childcare, I wasn't actually arguing for the right to put your child that's been in school all day with your ill grandma. There's lots of other people you can provide childcare that were being banned from doing so. But saying that, we can be more creative with what we do. If the government had worked with unions to provide safer workspaces and brought in restrictions for employers first, that would have been much better. If the government maybe worked a bit harder to communicate public health advice, everybody's confused. And people, if they do not believe that the advice is right and the advice damages them, they won't follow it. We need to keep people on side. So I think we need to think about how we allow people to socialise safely. And when things like cutting an hour off drinking time in the pub is just arbitrary, and the rule of 6 is just arbitrary. There's been no research into this, there's no evidence, and people look at it and they go, look, if there's no evidence, why are we doing this? Let's follow the science.
Paul, I agree by the way, Sam. Paul, are you anything?
Totally agree with what Samantha said there. It's just, why cut an hour off? COVID seems, in our workplace, we often have a bit of a joke, like that COVID, it's really clever because it knows to avoid children, it knows to avoid schools where everyone's sat in a room together, so it won't touch them. And now it seems to know that, like, you know, if you want to go home a bit earlier, it won't come out at the pub. You know, that this hour at the pub's going to make all the difference. Really? How? It's just the least profitable hour. That's it.
Just an attempt to fool something which can't be fooled. Stuart?
Yeah, on the least profitable hour thing, I've actually been told by some local restaurateurs that's currently their most profitable hour, as lots of people are actually returning back. They've seen a shift in their business model, where if they were sticking on bands or live music, they've only just managed to get back. That last hour was like that was the be all and end all. So by taking that away, it's crippled a few businesses, I would imagine, in County Durham. So there should have been some, forethought into the kind of package of support that they would be getting before you make the announcement on that.
I mean, I couldn't agree more with that. As you know, I'm chair of a local community centre, and where you have something that it depends on footfall, the rules that they're making are just crucifying us. And you're going to see all kinds of businesses, especially when the end furlough. You're going to see all kinds of businesses just collapsing, because you cannot have a business that depends on footfall without feet falling on it. And I'm scared to death. On this subject, Laura, just draw the whole thing to a close for us. Do you see any lights at the end of this tunnel?
Yeah, it's not all doom and gloom. I think generally people are caring and considerate. There's obviously, I know with how contagious this thing is, it is difficult because there are some people who are just fed up and go do whatever they want. But, the flu killed thousands and thousands. It's a long game, but of course we're going to get through it. We will. I don't know how much more bad stuff we have to go through before we get there, but we will. And we've just got to keep doing what we can. And, if we need to, we just need to police ourselves and be considerate as best we can.
You're a kind person. At this point, I was hoping to be able to bring in our guest questioner, because as you know, what happens is that people offer to ask a question, come onto the show and ask a question. The person we had arranged for today works at night, but was hoping to be off on time to come, but it's 9:30 now, and he's clearly not going to be able to make it, which is a big disappointment for us all. But nevertheless, I'm going to ask the question for him, and we'll just see. We'll just ask the team, shall we, what they think of our guest listener question. And the question is this, very short and sweet. Should we extend furlough? Just talking about that a moment ago. Should we extend furlough? And I note that Jeremy Corbyn has just tweeted sort of a couple of hours ago saying that we should. So we'll see how many Corbynites we have on the team. Paul, kick us off. Should we extend furlough?
Yes, in a specific way. We had firms that have been using furlough in order to get money, and they were still expecting a lot of their employees to work during the furlough period. So we've seen it quite abused, and we saw during the furlough period big companies taking advantage of tax breaks. So, for example, Tesco, it was 632 million tax break or something in the first couple of months of COVID, and then paid it all to their shareholders. And you think, well, that was a bonus that they got. That was a bonus dividend that they got. How can you go around that? It hasn't really been targeted. It hasn't been targeted enough anyway. There are certain sectors that will keep going, such as supermarkets. They didn't shut at all. They actually had very profitable times. But if that furlough had been targeted, I think what we're seeing the money that's being put in. Again, we have a trickle-up economy. So we have an economy where if the government puts some money in, if the government creates a deficit, that deficit tends to end up in the Cayman Islands. So this is the problem that we have as a nation, as an economy. They should be targeting certain companies, such as we've had on the show before, like Nissan needs a little bit of help. The manufacturing industries need a little bit of help. Places where they have to be very close to each other will need help, whereas other industries won't. So a blanket furlough, no. If you're going to do that, you might as well bring in a UBI, which, again, it's worth consideration, but I don't think they're going to do that.
What it means.
Universal basic income, so give everyone a certain amount of money regardless, and then everyone enough money to live. This should happen with increased automation anyway, and then you would choose to work extra and get extra money on top of that, but everyone would have a certain amount of... It sounds a little bit far-fetched and very newfangled and stuff, but it's actually a very, very old idea. The idea that everyone would have a basic income and you would move... you would just simply have enough money to get on with, and people do continue to work. Finland's tried this out recently. It was quite a successful scheme.
I always wondered about Star Trek, Paul, when whether they paid the people on Star Trek, because everything was given to them, wasn't it? They could go and press the button.
I was going to say, I'm sure we can answer this question.
Samantha definitely do that, but we've got Tony.
That's it, right?
He's here. So shall we bring him in?
We definitely.
So they didn't pay people on Star Trek. Well, it depends. It's complicated.
Because
some species have currency, but generally you don't get paid if you work for Starfleet. No, because it's a post-scarcity society, so you just replicate yourself a new pair of shoes.
That's the point. Stuart, you wanted to speak.
Yeah, there's actually a couple of really good economic books based on the economics of Star Trek.
Yes.
Yeah, and they're actually brilliant reads, and my understanding of UBI basically comes from those books, so I'll try and find a link to them.
Thank you. Tony, we were just killing time to get here talking about Star Trek. And I've asked you, welcome to the show, by the way, Tony. Can you hear us? Obviously not. Tony, can you hear us? Can you hear us? No, I don't think.
Oh.
Tony, can you hear us?
Oh, we can't hear you though.
We can't hear you.
No.
If you can see your microphone on the bottom of the screen that says mute.
He's not muted.
Is he not? Oh no. This happened to me. This happened to me earlier on today, and my microphone was physically muted.
He's connecting to audio.
Here he comes. Here he comes.
Are you on?
Earlier on today, and my microphone.
I think it's only the fifth time I've used Zoom, so I'm still a novice.
Hi. Are you listening to the show separately? Have you got the show on separately? Because I can hear an echo.
Yes, if you can turn down the other device that it's on, because there's a delay.
On twice. I don't know what's.
If you can turn off your internet browser.
Okay, right, wait a second.
That sounds good.
There we go. That sounds
Are you all
better.
right with that?
I've got it.
Hey, we got ya.
Hey. Tony, I spoiled everything for you by asking your question.
Oh, that's fine. I was messaging you saying I'm here, but
So you can't do more
it's just
than one
so
thing.
wonderful to have you on the show. Thank you very much, and hopefully the start of many times when you'll turn up asking various questions. But sort of seeing as we've asked the question that actually Paul's answered to a degree. Before I come to my other guest, the team, what do you think about it? Do you think we ought to extend furlough, and if so, why?
well, I think we definitely need to do something. I think potentially we're looking at 10% of the population becoming unemployed. There's 900,000 people come off furlough all at the same time. I currently still have staff on furlough myself, and work isn't where I would expect it to be. So I think we are going to need some help, and I think hopefully we could go along the lines of something like what France and Germany is doing, and I think they're where we can bring people back for some hours and the government reimburses us for the rest. I mean, we need to gradually step back into the work again.
Is that not the case already, Tony? I mean,
that's what's happening at the moment, but on the 31st of October, that just stops. At the moment, for October, we get 60%.
So, are you looking for a further tape, perhaps going down 50% or 40%, sort of, or I mean, what Paul was suggesting that it would be better if we sort of did it in some industries, but not in others. Stopped it in some industries, but kept other industries going. I mean, how would you deal with it?
Well, I think at the moment, what the current situation is most adversely affecting the nighttime economy. Every time there's bad news, I just see my work on the night just totally shut down. And it's non-existent. So then that's 50% of my turnover is just gone. Basically, every time there's bad news on the television, people just stop in on the night time, basically.
Let's see what other members of the team think. Stuart, talk to us about furlough, particularly in relation to the nighttime economy.
I think it's deeply important. I mean, clearly we're going to see a shift away from like hospitality industries, and a lot of that is nighttime stuff, isn't it? What would have been nice to see is a furlough system that could have transferred into like a UBI and a job guarantee system, where these people who were moving out of the hospitality industry could have gone and helped out with the track and trace and the testing and all that. I mean, I imagine that most taxi drivers who aren't making any money wouldn't mind sticking swabs in someone's nose.
It depends how hard they're shoving them, getting them back. So, Laura, I mean, what's your thoughts about this issue?
I mean, especially after today, where we've announced that these restrictions are going to be another 6 months, absolutely the hospitality industry, the furlough needs to continue for them, I believe, anyway. I think one thing I am concerned about, and I think we can all see it coming, to be fair, is that even if they do that, it's just more money that they feel is owed to them. And I think in future we will see us having to pay all this money back anyway, regardless, and that's going to hit everyone again, just in a different way. I'd echo what Paul said. People who are using furlough to make a profit, that's not acceptable. This is, a national crisis. We all need to pull together. We don't need to be making money out of it. This furlough scheme is to keep businesses afloat, and it should keep going in that standing.
Tony, are you not scared of the amount that the furlough scheme is costing and will cost if we keep it going? I mean, surely we just can't afford to keep paying people to stay at home.
it's going to cost an awful lot more if we have a lot of people become unemployed at the same time. That's going to be devastating for the economy in many ways.
Do you think that furlough is for the firms, or is it for the employees?
It's for employees. And I mean, speaking for myself, I've actually been paying above the furlough. I've been paying my employees 100% when they've been on furlough, and the government's only ever been paying 80%. And I think it took about 6 to 7 weeks before we actually got anything back from the government, which pretty much pushed us to the wire at the time.
By the way, the same's been happening to us. Let's just talk to Sam for a little while. Sam, what's your solution to all this furlough problem? I mean, we've sort of had virtually a consensus from people. It needs to continue after sort of the end of October. But have you got any further light to shed for us on how it might happen, or?
Yeah, I just think it's really interesting how it's something that is uniting everybody except the Tories in the House of Commons. Like, everybody. I was watching, because I am boring like this, I was watching the Parliament channel like almost all of today, and every time somebody was asking a question, it was, sorry, Prime Minister, but we have to come back to this. And it's been like that for the last few weeks. So it's just willful ignorance at this point to not have thought of a solution. And this is the problem. We started off with Rishi Sunak writing blank checks here, there and everywhere. Everybody could see when you're saying, oh, we're going to do this, and not putting any checks and balances in place, that unscrupulous businesses were going to take advantage of it. And then you've got businesses like Tony's, who we should rightfully support, who will use the money to support their staff and not their offshore bank accounts, ended up getting penalised in the end. It's just not on.
Even I was looking earlier today, and I think as of 5 hours ago, even the Governor of the Bank of England's caused a rethink on the issue, seeing the dangers that's involved in suddenly becoming unemployed.
Thank you. I was going to give you the last word, and you took it anyway, Tony. It's so lovely of you to come on and ask a question, I hope that the listeners have enjoyed listening to the team and to your thoughts as well. And will you come back and join us with another question some other day, please?
I would love to. I've been watching you for weeks now, so I'm quite privileged coming on.
Yeah, no, not a privilege. Our privilege entertaining you. Thank you very much indeed. And
thank you.
We have lots of people listening to this, and so perhaps somebody is listening, somebody with real influence, Richard Holden. If you're listening, Richard, furlough has to keep going. Here's a chance for you to steal somebody's idea again and bring something about. Thank you so much. Bye bye. And
Thank you.
See you later. Thank you. You'll be rudely dismissed by Paul. There you go. Finally, the last section of the show.
Hang on, I was just doing a removal.
Wonderful music, proper music there, I have to say, having got into those awful trouble the other week. We've got two of the stories. One of them I'm hoping will last us through to the end, and I will just squeeze in the other because it's really important to me. I'm going to start with Sam. Teaching Britain's dark past. A big issue now with Black Lives Matter and other things. And they've just started up a slavery tour of London. Tell us what you think.
So I am very much in favour of teaching about our colonial past. I think it's really important that everybody knows about it, because unfortunately people don't. You know, we live in a world at the moment where people will share memes about buying things in Britain after coronavirus ends, and they'll have a picture of tea bags on it. Like, you can't grow tea in this country, I'm afraid. It will have to be imported. And tea is one symbol of our colonial past that people just don't recognise. So there's this slavery tour of London. Now, I have to admit, I am a card-carrying social justice warrior, and my first thing was like, oh, right, who is running this? Where is the money going? Because actually, slavery isn't just like a London tourist like thing. It's something that needs to be taken seriously, and we need to make sure we're not sort of gentrifying it and taking it away from the people who are harmed by it and making money off it ourselves as white people. That's just all kinds of appropriative badness. So I've struggled actually to find that kind of information out about it, but I assume that somebody like me would have found out and called that out if it was the case. So and it does feature on some very anti-slavery websites and things, so I assume that they are the right people who are funneling the money in the right place, and not just not making it a fashion thing. That's what I was like worried about, you know. So yes, very good. It does seem like it's run by academics, but you know, again, so yeah, so that's what that's my top and bottom of it. If you are going to learn about slavery, that is great, that is right. I think it should actually happen in schools. I don't think it's something you should be able to opt into, because it's only the people who don't need to learn more about stuff who end up on these training things. You'll have noticed, hopefully, the European Research Group of Tory MPs have refused to do some unconscious bias training, and that just says everything. You know, they're so confident that they don't have unconscious bias. These people opted themselves out of things who obviously need it.
Prove the point.
Yeah.
This is I'm just going to stay with you, Sam, for just a very short while. This is a big thing in schools, because the right are continually saying we want more British history in schools. But what they mean is they want the great people of modern times. And sort of, I mean, is there a balance to be got here between what we teach about British history to our children, about teaching the bad things along with the good things? And is that not just a matter of what teachers have been doing forever? I mean, what I'm trying to suggest is it perhaps possible that the BLM insistence that we should sort of start teaching children about the bad things of the British Empire and British slavery is just as an unwelcome intrusion upon the rights of a teacher as the rights demanding that we teach about Wellington and Nelson and Churchill and the glories of the British Empire?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, you know what people get taught in schools in history because you used to teach it. In religious studies, we had a different approach where every and we still do, every syllabus for religious studies below GCSE is locally agreed so that it fulfills the needs of the community. And I think that might be a good approach for history, so that your history reflects the history of the kids that you're teaching. It's a good idea.
First on Political Unmuted. That's a brilliant idea.
It is a good idea.
We need somebody, we need a politician, a local politician, to start pushing this idea.
Yes.
Paul, you're a teacher. What do you reckon to all this?
I don't think it's widely known, like the history of the empire and the negative parts of the empire and even the positive parts. I think people just want to sing Rule Britannia and want to say, oh yeah, Britain were brilliant and we did these great things, and maybe someone knows something about the railways and maybe something knows about like a couple of world wars and a World Cup, you know, and that seems to be what people are interested in. I think what people don't realize is, like, you know, racism was constructed around the empire, you know, like, so they decided, like, people will come out with facts, and it's really interesting when people say, oh, black people sold slaves as well. Well, yeah, of course they did, because they were in Africa, and black people didn't see themselves as being a group. They were just people. It was just like anyone else. The people who were selling them into slavery were awful people, like we have awful people who were white, and you know, it's slavery was designed. Racism was sort of designed to justify slavery. They're saying, "Oh, these people are different," and was genetically, DNA wise, people aren't different. So this idea, it's actually really intrinsically linked with empire, and I think people really missed that point. So it was an oppressed people, and in Akala's book, it's really interesting. He talks about when his grandfather came to England, he came over and he couldn't believe that there were white people sweeping the streets, because in Jamaica they'd been told that, you know, it was this land of plenty. England was this great place, and you know, no one had to do those jobs, and a white person would certainly never be in the same social bracket as them. But then when they came to England, they found out that wasn't the case. This is the history of the working class, regardless of perceived race or how people have been racialized, whether you're black or white. And I think people who are white who've been oppressed should be looking at our brothers and sisters who are black, who've been in these situations and historically where they've had their skin color used as a tool to oppress them. We should all be in it together. And I'm not saying our struggle's been exactly the same as theirs, but there's a link there. There's more in common with working class in one nation and with the sort of the poor people of England and black people than there is, you know, between me and Boris Johnson, for example.
Absolutely spot on. As to black people selling black people, one of the cleverest things of the British Empire is what they did is they moved in and they didn't oppress the people, and what they did is they got the local rulers to introduce British rule and to oppress their own people. It was just sort of a deal they did with the upper classes, and they didn't need a lot of the nastiness. It wasn't done by the British. Sort of, they just sat back and let those locally really do it to their own people. Stuart, so you're a parent. Sort of, what kind of history do you want your child to study?
Accurate. I want accurate history. You know, I think that kids miss out on a lot of the fascinating stuff that went on in history, as well as all the nasty stuff and the awful stuff. And if we had, you know, we were completely honest and we didn't look through the rosy goggles of the British Empire in the history class, we'd have better kids for it.
That one of the problems is that there is no truth about history. There are just different interpretations, and so it's down to how you interpret it all, and it's getting that balance right, and that balance is a personal decision. So the truth about your child is that your child needs teaching to make that decision, and it's the job of the teacher to try and make sure that the kind of facts are put in front of her are well balanced, sort of, and like that. So from what you see as a parent, do you think that your daughter is getting any of these kind of things taught to her?
I think she's picking it up through society. I don't think she's getting it as such in the classroom. I think with a lot of minorities and protected groups, she's just much more aware of them because of how society is made up at the moment. And in 10, 20 years, she'll be a very different person to the kind of person I was when I was her age. You know, she'll be, you know, dramatically more aware of what's going on, and she might have better insight into our history and what went on.
Yeah, I'm going to stay with this, Laura. I'm going to stay with Stuart for just a little while. Do you really think that what your daughter's being taught now will give her an insight that's worth anything in 20 years' time?
Yeah, you mean, but education isn't just the classroom situation anymore, is it? I think with it, we've proved that it's very different with COVID and how we've been teaching kids over the last few months. And they can pick stuff up from lots of different places. And, YouTube has all sorts of history. And I found out about, the first naval battle of World War One this morning. And it took place in Africa between two drinking buddies. And one of the boats was, in dry dock. It was fascinating. And that was just on YouTube. So imagine the stuff that, a 7-year-old who's got some, how should I say, interest and intrigue might be able to find out about the world with all these tools.
Laura, I had a great question to ask you, and Stuart's just got me thinking, and it's completely gone out of my mind. You're a mother, I'm going to suggest to you that what your children learn in school is almost irrelevant to the way they then use that to inform their principles and morality. And that much more important for those things are what they're seeing on the television, what they're seeing on the social media, and what they see in the home. Is it really all that important that schools teach the nasty bits of the British Empire?
I think it is important. I think it's important for them to learn these things alongside peers. I know that my daughter, she's got 2 best friends at school, and they soak everything up together and they talk about it together. And yes, obviously parents do the job of hopefully teaching morals and respect and understanding and care and all of that to their children. But there's a place for knowledge, and education is absolutely important. You've said, and I've got to say, I've thoroughly enjoyed this part of the show. It has been so interesting, and I think I've changed my mind about 4 times throughout the course of just this 10 minutes. But things like, I think it said that Nelson and Churchill are being taught as glories of the British Empire. There are many people who would argue against that, and I think Stuart's right, a bit of honesty. And not just giving your point of view, but just giving the fact and having a debate with the kids. Kids are really clever, and they'll pick up on that and will say, well, this happened, and it could mean this or this, and what do you think, and talk about it. And just get them to sort of start thinking in a more open-minded way, trying to sort of dig through facts that are presented to you and learn how to question things. With the Banner Group, we've been in schools sort of doing exactly that, because there's a big gap for that with our children. I don't think children like just being given information and being told, well, that's a fact, so, and that's, especially in history, that's where your history's formed, so deal with that. And I guess sort of a product of that, I don't know our history that well, and I'd absolutely love to learn about it. I will probably go on that tour and have a look at it, as long as, like Samantha said, it isn't just for a bit of money-making fashion. Oh, look, we care about black people. If it is a genuine history to teach people that the oppression in our societies, that is really important for understanding and carrying our society forward. That went on a bit, didn't it? Sorry, I got into a bit of a rant there.
No, spot on. I actually had something to say at the end, which is one of my big beefs, but we've run out of time. So, sort of the pill of wisdom I had to drop at the end of the show, sort of, you will never know, listener, you will never know. Well, I think you did fantastic this week. And if you don't think that, well, there's something wrong with you. Because thank you for the team, the insights you've shown, and the vibrancy with which you've addressed all these topics, including the one that we go back to again and again and again. Fantastic. Thank you, team, so much. What's going to happen now, listeners, as always, Paul's going to play the music. If you're going, we're all saying goodbye now to you. Goodbye. But sort of, we stay on for a little while. I'm going to try and keep it to half an hour. And just look at some of the comments you make. Our question master, Samantha, reads out your comments and your questions from the comments, if there have been any. And we have to talk about those things. It's much more relaxed and sort of informal and often ruder. And so it's worth listening to. But if you're going to go now, because you've got to go, goodbye, listener. Thank you. See you next week. God bless you all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Keep the red flag flying here.